Hey guys, we've got news in the Shawn Cranston murder trial. The verdict has just recently come back. Shawn Cranston has been found guilty on all counts. I'm going to tell you more about that, about the sentence, and about the trial, which started actually Monday of this week and just wrapped up Thursday, yesterday. Now, most of you know this, but Shawn Cranston was accused in the murder of a 23-year-old pregnant Amish woman named Rebekah Byler. She was found murdered in her home, brutally murdered in her home in northwestern Pennsylvania last February 2024. After about a 5-day investigation, Cranston was arrested and charged with the crimes. Now, this is from WANE. Guilty on all charges. That's the verdict in the trial of Shawn Cranston, the man accused of murdering a pregnant Amish woman last year in Sparta Township. It took the jury less than 3 hours to find Shawn Cranston guilty on all charges in the murder of Rebekah Byler and her unborn child. Now, if you've been following this case and you've been following my videos, you know that this trial has been delayed. It was actually postponed 3 times. And then just this past Monday, they went ahead with jury selection and started the trial immediately following jury selection. So the trial started Monday. They had about 3 days of testimony, and then yesterday it wrapped up. Okay, so things moved pretty quickly here. I've actually been covering it on the website. I have more detailed posts about the testimony and everything that happened in the trial at AmishAmerica.com. Back to the report, a Crawford County jury found 53-year-old Shawn Cranston guilty of criminal homicide in the first degree, criminal homicide of an unborn child in the second degree, burglary in the first degree, and criminal trespass in the first degree. The prosecution put 24 witnesses on the stand, including Rebekah's husband, who found her body 2 hours after the murder, his driver, who made the 911 call. That's the driver of Rebekah's husband. He was actually out checking, I believe, on a construction job that morning. Dozens of forensic experts and a prison inmate. This was an interesting one, who claimed Cranston admitted to killing the 23-year-old pregnant Amish woman during a burglary. That was testimony from Wednesday, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But in any case, after 16 months, justice has been done in this case. If you followed the trial, there was a lot of evidence against Cranston, it seemed. So it's not really surprising to me that this came back as a guilty verdict. Again, not a legal mind or in any way, but just looking at all the pieces of evidence that they had accumulated. So what are some of the quote-unquote highlights from this trial, just to give you a quick recap? I mean, one of them I mentioned already. There was an inmate that testified that Cranston actually told him that he had broke into a home and killed a woman, and he was concerned about a glove he had left behind. And that was actually a piece of evidence in the trial as well. There was a piece of a nitrile glove that was found, I believe it was in the wastebasket of the Byler's kitchen, that basically had Cranston's DNA on it. Okay, I think it was like with a probability of like an insane probability that it was Cranston's DNA match. They can't say like 100%, but it's like 99.9999 to the nth degree that it was his. This person, Joseph Birch is his name, was asked why he was testifying. He said his quote seemed like the right thing to do. He said no one had promised him anything in return for his testimony. Another witness, this was actually from the first day of the trial, was Rebekah Byler's husband, Andy. And of course, you really feel for a man who has to come up on the stand and talk about such a horrible day. He described how his children, his 3-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter, when he got home, told him that someone was there and killed their mother. So, I mean, they understood in the moment that their mother had been killed, at age 2 and 3 years old. Andy said, and I didn't believe it, is the quote. But then he went in and he went up to the door, he saw his wife's prayer covering on the floor. Actually didn't go fully inside, but when the PA state trooper came, the trooper was the one that found Rebekah Byler's body on the floor. She was about 6 months pregnant. Okay. Another piece of evidence that came out, I mean, and her wounds were horrible. I mean, there was a discussion of the nature of her wounds. She had 9 knife wounds on her neck. I'm not going to go into all of it now. You can read about it if you want. She was also shot. We learned that she was carrying a baby girl, some really horrible, heavy testimony. And again, I don't want to go into all of it right here, but that just gives you an idea of what was going on there. There were a lot of Amish people there in attendance. There were apparently dozens of Amish that attended. At one point, they played the recording of the 911 call that Andy Byler, Rebekah's husband, his driver made to report what had happened. And apparently you could hear the voices of the children in the background, and a lot of the Amish, in attendance, were crying and stuff. So there was no videos or any kind of images from this trial. There's no photos taken in the trial. Like sometimes trials have photo images you can show, sometimes they don't. I guess that was a decision made in this case. So there were other elements of testimony. They looked at the shoe prints. It was testified that there were multiple burglaries that had happened in other Amish homes in the 2 months prior to this, what basically they believe was a home invasion by Shawn Cranston that went wrong because someone was home. But basically, there were 2 Amish homes that were burglarized, one in January, one, I believe, in February. And each time, valuables were taken. And then we also heard here that in the case of the Bylers, after they came home and found Rebekah murdered, Andy Byler said that a safe was missing from the home. There was some testimony that Cranston had been, I guess it's called shed hopping, which I guess is where you go from building to building and break in and steal valuables, due to a methamphetamine habit or usage. What else? I mean, there were other things about the tires, and I guess one of the more interesting things was one of the officers had done a recreation of Cranston's whereabouts on the day of the murder, and he used GPS, he used cell phone tower, I guess, tracking or signals, and also video surveillance, like where you had video cameras like outside buildings and things. They got that video and they were able to piece things together and see that this is Cranston was here, he was there, and so forth. So apparently it was a pretty fascinating, I mean, that's a good word to use, but compelling piece of evidence where he basically, took you through the whole day that Cranston spent that day. And there's a really good account of this in the Meadville Tribune, which I've got a link to in my post. Just to give you an example of how thorough this is, this was Lieutenant Matthew Bonin that did this presentation. From the Meadville Tribune, it says, Cranston's activities that day, as described by Lieutenant Matthew Bonin, were in many ways seemingly unremarkable. Cranston left home around 8:40 a.m. in a red Jeep Patriot and stopped a few minutes later to pay a utility bill. Jumping ahead, Cranston next drives south, stopping about 1.4 miles from the Byler residence. So they're able to know kind of where he is. Around 9:05 a.m., however, his cell phone stops moving. GPS data shows that his vehicle continues on while the cell phone remains stationary for more than an hour. Quote, the phone stayed in this area, but the vehicle did not stay in this area, Bonin told the jury. Kind of weird, but at 10:04 a.m., GPS data shows Cranston's red Jeep right in front of the Byler residence. It's a quote. Bonin continued, the car remains there until 10:11, so 7 minutes went by, when it moved a few hundred yards south on Fish Flats Road. So does that mean he was inside the home for about 7 minutes doing what he was doing and then got back and left? Well, approximately a minute later, the car was back at the Byler home, where it remained until 10:17, when GPS data showed it just north of the house. So you kind of wonder he actually, according to this, he went back and did something there. And there's a lot more like that. So it's there's a pretty compelling presentation that this officer put together. So guys, what about his sentencing? People are wondering, well, what kind of sentence is he going to get now that he's been convicted? So Cranston is scheduled to be sentenced July 28th. And apparently, and I didn't really realize this before the case, this conviction has a mandatory life sentence attached to it. So I guess it's one of those crimes where there's not a lot of discretion for the judge in this case to decide how many years he might get or what have you. But it's also not a death penalty. So people are saying, well, he should get the death penalty. Well, I guess Pennsylvania apparently does have the death penalty, but there's apparently a moratorium on the death penalty right now, and I don't even know if that would ever come into play. It sounds like he will be spending the rest of his life in prison. So the sentencing is July 28th. I suppose that is basically a formality at this point. Again, not a legal person, but that's kind of what it seems like. I mean, what can you say at the end of this thing? Justice is done. He has been found guilty. All the usual things you want to say about, like, you hear people say about, like, closure or, this is a step forward or what have you. I mean, I don't know. I don't know any of these people personally. I don't know any Amish from this community. So I haven't spoken with anyone directly who knows the Bylers or anything like that. But you just hope it is something that has a positive effect. I don't think the Amish are out for vengeance or that sort of thing. It's generally not their MO. They're more about, well, we leave matters of God in God's hands. But on a human or personal level, I hope for Rebekah Byler's husband Andy, for her other family, her parents, I guess. I don't know if they're living or not, but I assume they are. Their sisters, brothers, obviously her children. I hope this is something positive for them in some sense. It's about all I can say. So I've done a number of videos on this topic. The first one, I was like a lot of people, I was shocked when this story happened, last February, but it's finally come to a conclusion. I don't know if there's like appeals process, all that sort of thing. Maybe there is, but it sounds like the jury did their job well and got to a decision that seems to me to be justified, looking at all the evidence that was presented. Of course, I've been reading secondhand accounts. I wasn't at this trial. I've just been reading multiple reports from different outlets, different reporters. Seems to me they came to the right conclusion. So, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for following this. I hope to have more happy stories. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you again soon.